All right, hello and welcome to the LSP 120 web lecture for loans. So last time we talked about savings accounts. And with a savings account, we have some interest rate that compounds either monthly, quarterly, or annually and pays interest to us. Typically for a savings account, that interest rate is going to be fixed. It's not going to change on us. It's going to be paid to you at a fixed amount as long as you keep that money in that account. And the savings account is variable. So most of the time you can keep your money in as long as you like. Most savings accounts tend to be liquid, so you can move money in and out of them as you please. Generally speaking, the more liquid a savings account is, the easier it is for you to move money out of it, the less interest you're going to pay. There are certain kinds of accounts that will pay you a little bit higher interest, but you do need to agree to leave your money in there for some specific amount of time. Now, the way that banks work is on one side, they take in savings accounts, right? So they take money in from customers, they keep it in those accounts, and on the other side, they loan that money out to other people. So they pay you, let's say, 2% interest to keep your money in a savings account, right? Every year, depending on how depending on whether your interest gets calculated monthly, quarterly, annually, you're getting paid some amount of interest. 2% interest on a savings account. And then what they do is with that money that they have in their bank, they take it and they actually loan it out to other people. So you need a savings account, a place to put your money, and your neighbor needs a new car. And so the bank takes your money and loans it out to the neighbor. Let's say they charge the neighbor 6% interest. So they're paying you 2, they charge the neighbor 6, and so they get to keep that 4% difference. And that, on a very basic level, is how banks operate. Now, again, that's the most basic level. We won't talk about investment banks and mortgage-backed derivatives and credit default swaps and all the kinds of crazy things that banks do. But on a very basic level, taking in and holding onto money in savings accounts and then using that money to originate loans is how most banks basically work. Now, in terms of a loan, typically the kinds of loans that you guys will experience, that most people will experience, are going to be student loans, mortgages on homes, home loans, and car loans. Those are the three big kinds of loans that you will come across. Now, with a loan, typically you're going to have a fixed interest rate. So when you sign on the dotted line at the car dealership, you're going to know exactly what the interest rate is. Or when you agree to your terms of your student loan, you're going to know exactly what that interest rate is. With loans, interest is calculated monthly and paid to the bank. So with a savings account, the bank pays you to hold on to your money, and with a loan account, you pay the bank, right? You pay the bank for the privilege of owing them money. Okay. Now, with loans, payments are going to be fixed. So when you graduate from DePaul and you have some student loans, after a grace period, they will send you some information and say, you need to pay X amount of dollars every month for 10 years, and that will pay off your student loans with interest. Okay. Notice I said 10 years. The period of time for a loan is also going to be fixed. You walk out of the car dealership and they say, okay, you owe us this money for this car, and you're going to pay us this much every month for 5 years. And at the end of that 5 years, you will have paid off that credit card. Okay, I'm sorry, you will have paid off that loan. So with student loans, typically you're going to look at a 10-year window. Now, there's one thing I always mention to students about student loans. When you graduate, if you find yourself unable to afford your student loan payment, one thing to keep in mind is that the government does do what's called income contingent repayment, where they will look at your finances, your taxes, and they will determine payment that will fit within your affordability. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, just make sure you Google income contingent repayments. Now, the one cool thing about loans, because the interest rate is going to be fixed, it's not going to change on you. And because the period of the loan is not going to change, with a student loan, it's going to be 10 years. With a car loan, it'll range from 3 to 7 years. 7 is sort of the max. And then with a home loan, usually those can be 10, 15, 20, 25, or 30 years. The most common, though, are 15-year loans and 30-year loans. But if you know all of these things, with just those 3 pieces of information, you can actually figure out a monthly payment. You can figure out how much interest you're going to pay over the life of the loan, and you'll figure out how much you pay in total. One thing we're going to talk about today is this idea that when you finance something, when you borrow money to buy a thing, the true cost of that thing to you isn't the price that you pay, but it's the price that you pay plus the interest that you have to pay in order to finance that purchase. Okay? So if you're trying to decide between more than one loan, let's say, all of this information might be important to you. What will my monthly payment be? How much am I going to pay in total? And how much will I pay over the life of the loan? So we'll say, for the sake of argument, that you're buying a brand new car, and by a brand new car, I mean a 2009 car, because that's when I created these slides. So we'll say that you're buying a new car, and you know you're going to need to get a loan for the cost. And you have these two options. You have a Honda Fit that is 4.9% APR for 36 months on a brand new 2009 Honda Fit for $14,550 out the door. And when I say out the door, that means that's the amount of the loan that you're going to need. When you actually buy a car, it's slightly more complicated. There's taxes and title and license and origination fees and this, that, and the other. But for this, we're going to simplify and just say $14,550 out the door. That's the loan you're going to need. Across the street, there's a smart car dealership offering 3.9% APR for 60 months on another car at $16,590 out the door. Now, if you like both cars, which one are you going to choose? And that question may come down to, well, what is the monthly payment going to be? Right? Now, with just these 3 pieces of information, you can find what the monthly payment will be for each of these cars. Now, what we're going to learn today is the payment function in Excel. So just like we can use the slope and the intercept function to generate a slope and an intercept given a set of data, we can use these 3 pieces of information, the interest rate, the number of payments you're going to make, and the value, the cost of the loan, to figure out what a monthly payment will be. Okay. So I'm going to go through each of these. So for the interest rate in this case is going to be R divided by C. It's going to be the number of, it's going to be the APR divided by the number of loan payments we're going to make in a year. Now, 99.99% of the time, the loan payments that you're going to come across are going to be monthly loans, where every year you're going to make a monthly payment. 12 times a year you're going to make monthly payments. So to get this rate, we're going to do equal to 0.049 divided by 12. So that's going to be our interest rate, 0.049 divided by 12. Now, the number of payments we're going to make for the Honda Fit, this is a 3-year loan. So that means in total, we're going to make 36 payments. And then the value of the loan is going to be negative $14,550. Now, if you see these parentheses here, this is just an accounting format. So if you wanted to see your negative number, you could always change this to number up here. Now, why is this a negative number? Well, if you think about maybe a time when you overdrew your bank account, your checking account, what you may have noticed, in addition to getting charged a ridiculous fee, what you'll notice is that when you overdraw your checking account, your account balance is negative, right? Because you owe money to the bank. Now, when we think about loans, we think about that as a negative balance, right? The bank is opening up an account for you, and that account balance is negative $14,550. And your goal is to submit payments to that account to bring that account back to zero. Okay, so that's why we think about this as a negative number. Now, these are the three features that we're going to be interested in. I have these options down here. These will also be in the payment function, but we're going to ignore those. So we want to figure out what the payment is for the Honda Fit. We can insert the payment function. So I'm going to go right here to the little insert function button. Now, because I'm teaching this on this computer, payment is right here. But if you can't find that, you can always type PMT and click go, and that payment function will pop right up. Now, we're going to plug into this the three pieces of information. Now, you could type R divided by C up here, your interest rate divided by 12 up here, but I'm just going to use reference cells. So there's my rate, my number of payments, and my balance. Notice too here on this, in this function arguments box, it says rate is the interest rate per period of loan. For example, use 6% APR. Okay. So if you can get to this window on the final exam and you're not exactly sure what to put in here, you can look right here and it tells you exactly what to put in. So when we click OK, we're going to end up with $435.42 for our monthly payment. Now, what this means is that if you made this payment, $435, every month for 36 months, you would pay back the loan, including the interest that you pay on that loan. Now, you might say to yourself, looking at this $435 monthly payment, you might say to yourself, well, you know, I graduated and I got a job. It's a good job, but it's not a great job. I don't know if I can afford $435. Maybe I'll go and see what the cost, the monthly payment on the smart car is going to be. So when we go to the smart car, we're going to do the same things. We've got the interest rate, we've got the number of payments, and we've got the value. Now I'm going to show you a different way of doing this. The last time I typed all these things out in the sheets and I did them as reference cells, but really you can just insert this function here and you can type these directly into the payment function. So my rate, 3.9% divided by 12. So 0.039 divided by 12. 3.9% divided by 12. The number of payments, the total number of payments for the loan, is a 5-year loan. So the total number of payments is going to be 60. And my balance, how much do I owe? That's going to be minus $16,590. So when I click OK, I'm going to end up with a $304 payment, right? So if I make this payment $304 every month for 60 months, then I will have paid off the loan, including interest. Now, at this point, you might say, done, $304. That's cheaper than $400 and some odd dollars for the Honda Fit. So that's what I'm going to go with. But that's not the entire story, right? Just because a monthly payment is cheaper doesn't necessarily mean that the cost of that item is going to be cheaper. Because remember, the total cost to you is going to be the total amount of interest that you have to pay plus the cost of the item plus the price. So, excuse me, if you know what the monthly payment is, you can figure out the total. You can figure out the amount of interest that you're going to earn. So if we know we're going to pay $435.42 every month for 36 months, if we want to know how much we're going to pay in total, we can just do equal to 435 and 42 cents times 36. So we just figured out that over the life of that loan, we will pay in total, the total cost to us is $15,675. Now, if we want to know how much of that is interest, that's easy. We just subtract our account balance out of this total, right? If this total includes all that we have to pay, interest plus balance, then if we subtract this equal to this minus $14,550, which is the original price of the car, what we figure out is that the interest that we pay is going to be $1,125. So the total cost to us is going to be $1,125 for this for the interest on this Honda Fit. Total cost will be $15,675, and of that, $1,125 is interest. Or in other words, because you don't have the money to pay cash for this car right now, you're going to have to spend an extra $1,100 to finance. Now, I wonder what the total cost is going to be for the smart car. So total here. So if we figure this out, we've got $304 a month for 5 years. So the total is going to be equal to 304.78 times 5. Times 5 years, which is 60 times, which is 5 times 12, which is 60. So we're going to make 60 payments. We end up paying in total $18,286. If we want to figure out what the interest is, we can just subtract the cost of the car out, 16590 minus 16590, and this will leave us with how much interest. So the interest on the smart car is going to be $1,600, almost $1,700. Now, this might be a little weird to think about, right? The payment is lower, but the interest is higher. And the reason for this is that part of the reason that the payment is lower is because it's over a longer period of time, right? So all of these things come into play when we're talking about loans. The cost of the loan, the interest that you have to pay, the balance, and the amount of time that it takes you to pay it off. Generally speaking, right, the higher the interest rate, the more you're going to pay, right? We figure that. But also, the longer that you have that loan, the more interest you're going to pay, right? A lot of get-out-of-debt-now companies will promise to lower your monthly payments and help consolidate your debt. And what they do when they lower those monthly payments is they just extend the duration of the loan, right? The monthly payment, the monthly mortgage on a 30-year loan is going to be a lot less than the monthly mortgage on a 15-year loan, right? The longer it takes you to pay something off, the more interest you're going to pay, right? And the higher the APR, the more interest you're going to pay. So this is loans. One brief note, when you're working through the activity that's associated with loans, it's going to have you calculate some interest for some home mortgages. Two things to be aware of there. With a home mortgage, a 30-year loan, the number of payments you're going to make on a 30-year loan is going to be 12 payments a month times 30 years, which ends up being 360 total payments. Okay? So number one, be aware of that. If you get weird numbers for your mortgages, a mortgage should be like rent, right? A mortgage, unless you're buying like a $50 million home, a mortgage on a standard house should be in the neighborhood of rent. It should range between $1,000 and $4,000, roughly. If you end up with a monthly mortgage payment that's $15,000 or $30,000, you have done something wrong. So make sure you're careful with your interest rate. Don't forget to divide by monthly, interest rate divided by 12. Also with the number of payments. Don't forget it's in terms of number of payments. So a mortgage is going to be 30 years. That's going to be 360 total payments. Lastly, when you look at the interest on a mortgage, you're going to see that it is a lot of money. It is a ton of money. And sometimes students question the usefulness of buying a house when they see how much it costs in interest to buy that house. And there's typically a couple reasons why it is beneficial to buy a house. Number one, you own a thing, right? So when you rent, you're paying $1,000 a month, and when you move, you have nothing. If you have a mortgage, you're paying a lot of interest, but you physically own a thing that you could sell and recuperate some of that money back. Generally speaking, housing costs and prices go up over time. Typically, they go up at a faster rate than inflation. So there is that aspect of this as well. Owning a home is beneficial because the value of that home will increase over time. And then lastly, you don't pay any you don't pay any taxes on mortgage interest. So another benefit to paying all that crazy amount of mortgage interest is that when you do your taxes, you can deduct the full amount of that mortgage interest from your taxes. So you pay a little bit less in taxes. So that's it for loans. As always, email me if you have any questions.